Good morning or afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Revamp Your Employer Brand. My name is Max Smith. I am the Communications Director for 501c Services. Real quick, a little bit about us. We provide full service unemployment outsourcing programs to about 3,000 nonprofits. Some of our programs include the 501c Agencies Trust, and the 501c HR Services. HR Services is a consultation service to help nonprofits walk through their difficult HR predicaments. Many of you with us today are already working with us in some manner, some function, so thank you for attending today. To all of our visitors, welcome, welcome. We hope you'll enjoy yourself. I just have some real quick housekeeping to get out of the way. Then I will turn it over to our guest speaker, Ben. A lot of you are probably already wondering where the slides are, because I can read your mind. The slide deck will be provided to you via email later today. And also, if you check out the handouts section of your GoToWebinar browser, they are already there, so you can download them and take notes if you want to. Or, like I said, we'll send them to you later today via email. You want a video copy of this to share around to your friends and neighbors and loved ones, you'll also get a copy of a video recording of the session later today. If you're here for your good old SHRM credit, because you're trying to keep up on your continuing ed, we will get those to you later today, at the latest tomorrow. You know the drill about that. When we close the webinar, a little poll will pop up and you'll need to let me know to send it to you. So I know who needs it. If you have to have a meeting after this, you have to take off, don't worry about it. That poll will also be in the email sent out later today, and I will get those to you straight away. That's about it. Now I'm going to turn it over to our friend and neighbor, Benjamin Freedman over at Weiser. Hey, Ben, what's going on?
Hey, Mac, thank you so much for the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity today. Thank you, everybody who is joining. I appreciate you taking some time. Just to share a little bit of background on who Weiser Innovations is, if you're unaware. We are a consultancy specializing in talent acquisition strategy and implementation. And we are also the exclusive talent acquisition partner to 501c Services, working with them and their membership to ensure that any and all of your hiring needs are addressed and you have the people you need to make your missions possible. So with that, I want to talk about today's topic a little bit. Typically, when we talk about talent acquisition, a lot of people think it's synonymous with recruiting. Unfortunately, that's not totally the case. Recruiting is one element of talent acquisition, and there are quite a few other elements of it that make it a really robust, really strategic function. And one of the really important parts of it that is very frequently overlooked is that employer branding piece. And this is something typically that organizations will do when it comes to attracting members, when it comes to attracting funders, when it comes to doing things on the development side of things, but it's also hypercritical that this starts becoming something that's done to attract talent, to attract people to your organization. This has to be an integral part of the overall talent acquisition strategy, especially right now when it is so challenging and there is so much competition to attract people to your organizations. So as we go through this, if there are questions, feel free to reach out. I will be looking for them, but Mac will also be looking for them. Additionally, we will have a question answer opportunity at the end. I know if any of you have seen my more recent webinars, they've typically been more of a panel style, where this is a little bit more traditional, where we're going back to slides and really talking through, doing a deep dive in this area of marketing and employer branding so that it can apply to talent acquisition. So to get started, we're going to be looking at about 14 different things. First, we're going to define what it is. We're going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about how to reimagine and strengthen what you're doing with regards to employer brand. We're going to talk about why the messaging matters and why it's important. We're going to touch on why DEI policies are absolutely critical to this element of talent acquisition. We're going to talk about listening and tracking, why it's important to be flexible, why work-life balance is crucial, and then, like I said, we'll sum it up. And at that point, happy to answer any questions you have about this, or Weiser innovations, or anything. So to get started, what is employer branding and why is it important? So very basically, employer branding among employees as well as perspectives. When people hear a brand and they recognize it and they automatically have a feeling about it, that's huge. Positive or negative, it's huge because they know who you are. And that reputation is absolutely critical in attracting people. When you're an employer of choice, or when you're a big name in your community and people want to work for you, even if you don't have a job open, I mean, think how much easier it is to hire people when there's people that are just, trying their best to work for you, as opposed to being an organization that nobody really knows and then trying to have to attract people. And the first thing you have to do is introduce them to who you are. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more challenging. So when we think about branding, it's how you market your company to job seekers and internal employees. Are you a name that people know? Is your reputation strong? Are people talking about you? Like I said, out in the community, are people referring people to you? The stronger your employer brand, the more likely you are to attract and retain talent. And when we think about a hiring strategy, one of the most critical elements of a hiring strategy is retention. When people see an organization as a revolving door, that's typically a red flag. But when people see that there's stability, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, that's a place people want to work because they believe that the employees that are there get treated properly and have a good work relationship with the organization. So as we think about it, your employer branding, and the area that I think is absolutely most important is that area in red. The objective to attract and retain talent. But all these other things are important. Thinking about your target audience, thinking about your employer value proposition, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit. Thinking about, the content, what story are you telling? How are you communicating it? These are all things that are really critical when we're looking to appeal to people. Your organization is essentially a product and job seekers want to buy that product. And that's something that we do need to think about. So when we look at why this is important, the first thing that I want to focus on is on this top left. A strong employer brand can reduce the cost per hire by as much as 50%. So when we think about our organizations, and we think about the fact that we have restricted and unrestricted funds. Typically, most funds that are allocated to a nonprofit are allocated programmatically. And there's a small bucket for administrative costs. Also, typically, this is considered an administrative cost. So if you can chop that administrative cost by 50%, that's a huge savings to an organization. It also translates to the fact that you're hiring a lot faster and that the strain on your current employees is a lot less, simply because they don't have to fill in for empty slots. The second thing that I look at as to why this is really critical, as we talk about attention and we look at 92% of people will consider changing jobs if a role with a company with an excellent reputation came for them. Well, as we talked about, retention is so important. Having that stability is so important. I mean, if we think about mental health organizations, people can't have a new clinician every 3 weeks. If we think about an education organization, students need the same teachers. If we think about direct care, people develop relationships. The way we achieve our mission is through people. And so having people that are committed, having people that want to stay is huge. And we want to make sure that we keep who we have, especially when they're performing well. Something else to be aware of is job seekers are very savvy right now, and they know they have options. And so when we look at the fact that 86% of women and 76% of men won't join a company with a bad reputation, and 86% of employees and job seekers research company reviews and ratings to decide on where to apply for a job, this makes it absolutely essential that our reputation is strong. And if there's an issue, for example, somebody goes onto one of the review sites and writes something negative, are we responding? Are we going in and asking that person, thanking them for their feedback? Would love to have a conversation, because even that lets people know that you're open to hearing things, which is huge. One final thing on why it's important, an employee voice is 3 times more credible than a CEO's when it comes to talking about working conditions. As somebody who owns and operates a company, I'll be very honest, I'm skewed in what I think I do. I think it's great, but it's mine, and if I didn't think something was great, I would try to change it. But where the real power comes from are the people that work there because they want to, or that don't have skin in the game and can go work someplace else. It's the people that are on the front lines. So when your team members, unsolicited, talk about how wonderful it is to be there, how much they enjoy what they're doing and who they do it with, that message carries a ton of weight within the community, within job circles, and even whether it's a job fair or whether it's a video on your website, that has a real impact. So let's talk about how we reinvent the employer brand, or in some cases we create it. Like I said, right now we are in such a hyper competitive job market. Competition is fierce. People can pick and choose where they want to go in a lot of cases, and they can pick and choose in a lot of cases what type of work they want to do. So how do we create this brand that brings people to us? Well, first thing we have to do is we have to be fresh. If we're still using the same messaging that we did 20 years ago, we're behind. And people don't want to hear that. People want to hear what's happening relative to today. So highlight what makes your organization unique. Highlight your mission, highlight your value, your vision, your culture, and talk about how that makes you awesome. If anybody was on the last webinar I did with Alan Lesher, and Alan, if you're on the call, little shout out to something that you said. But one of the things that he said is we need to stop talking about how nonprofits, historically don't pay as much. What we need to start talking about is how huge the impact is. you change the focus of what you're doing, and it can be, a food bank that feeds, 70% of a community. It can be a hospital that takes care of people. It can be, a humane society that adopts out 100% of the animals that come in, so there's no, it's a no-kill shelter. Whatever the case may be, teaching, people how to swim. Whatever your nonprofit does, whatever that mission is, you're making a huge impact. Talk about that. People love feeling attached to something positive. People want to be part of something strong and significant, especially as we are looking at the newer generations in the workforce. They want to make sure that their work has meaning. So let's talk about that meaning. Let's talk about what we are able to do and what we do achieve versus, things that might be an obstacle. As somebody who's done a lot of recruiting in their career and who's still an active recruiter, remember that the language that we offer is really critical. That language has to be positive. That language has to attract. It has to appeal. It has to catch people's eye and their sensitivities, their sensibilities. It has to really speak to what's important and how it impacts what's going on around, both in your community, but also in a larger sense. The days of people joining an organization just because of mission is gone. But the days of people joining employers because they believe in the work, that still happens, but it has to happen in a way where they feel they're part of that change, where they feel their needs are being met. It's really, really critical that we present this way. And it's the same thing, if we're watching a truck commercial, every Chevrolet truck commercial I have ever seen talks about all the awards they're winning and how awesome their truck is. Doesn't talk about recalls. It doesn't talk about anything negative. Every Ford commercial is exactly the same way. Every Dodge commercial is exactly the same way. The way they're advertising, it appeals to you. None of them are highlighting that they get bad gas mileage. None of them advertise that, but they advertise, that they can move. You can put a house in the bed and drive your house across town. Well, it's highlighting the positive and really speaking to that so that prospective employees just get caught up and swept up in the greatness of your organization. So, as I mentioned when we started, your employer value proposition, your EVP. Well, this is part of your messaging. And your EVP answers one question: why would somebody want to work here as opposed to any place else? And this is really the base, the foundation of the entire employer brand. If you can answer why people want to work, if you cannot answer rather, why people would want to work there as opposed to someplace else, that's a huge problem. If you can say people want to work here because of this, 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 and this, which nobody else offers, or because the impact is tremendous, or because, whatever it is, that's really, really important. That one question, why would someone rather be here? And if your answer is, I don't know, then that's something that we have to think about. Because I know when I'm a job seeker, that's something that I ask. Why would I want to work here as opposed to, this other organization? Or why would I want to work with you as opposed to this other company where maybe I'm making 3 times as much and then I can just, write a check and still feel good about myself? And so as we're talking about our brand, this is really the baseline. Why do people want to work with our organization? So The next piece of this, and this is something that a lot of organizations are focused on right now, and a lot of organizations have been focused on for a long time, and a lot of organizations, this is the core of their mission: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it may not have always been called this, but this is something that is very, very paramount in our world right now. And it's something that job seekers need to know, they need to see, and they want to know and they want to see. You know, job seekers, especially most job seekers that want to be part of the nonprofit world, they want to know that there's impact and they want to make social change. Well, for that, they're not going to join an organization that doesn't practice this internally, that silences people or hides people or doesn't treat people, similarly. So first thing that's necessary is really updating the organization's social media, inclusive of job postings, inclusive of videos, inclusive of the stories that you tell, and market to the policies and programs that ensure equal opportunities for everyone. And that's critical because also one of the things that we see very often is when we talk about equal opportunities, a lot of times there are groups that aren't highlighted as much. For example, people with disabilities, veterans. Very often when we're talking about equitable opportunities, we talk about it in terms of ethnic identity, but we need to make sure that we're doing it holistically. And we need to make sure that that's highlighted and that's something that everybody can see. It should not just be one hidden line at the bottom of a job description, so-and-so is an equal opportunity employer. Make that part of who you are. Make that part of your messaging, front and center. The next piece, walking the talk, walk the talk. And this is where that communication is really important. You have to make sure that your brand really is aligned with your actions. The way that you embrace diversity speaks to who the organization is. And a perfect example of it, if we're a workforce development organization or we're an organization working with persons with disabilities on executive functioning or life skills, are we ever hiring the people that we're training? Or if we're an organization down the road, are we ever calling up that organization that's doing that training to hire those people? And these are things that we need to think about. We need to think about, are the people that we're working with people that we'd have represent us? And if they're not, the question is why not? Why wouldn't they be? As we're talking about diversity, as we're talking about equity, as we're talking about inclusivity. If I'm a workforce development organization and I need somebody to sit at my front desk, why aren't I looking inwards? If I'm an organization doing whatever and I need an accountant, why aren't I calling a job training place and ask them if they have anybody that would qualify at entry level? For one, you'll save a ton of money as opposed to going through a staffing firm. Two, the marketing of that is huge. And three, when you're looking at funding, funders love seeing organizational partnerships. So there's a lot of benefits to this, but we have to be focused on it. And the last thing on this is really getting personal. Based on a study from LinkedIn, personal and empathetically written DEI statements are so much more positive than boilerplate statements. And I'm going to generalize this a little bit. Anything that we do that is personal and empathetically written is so much more powerful. People want to know who they're working with. They want to hear those stories. They want the human element of it. They want that both from their leadership, from their coworkers, and from the people that we're working with. They want to be able to attach, and people like, even when we're talking about diversity, people want to be able to relate to other people. They want to be able to understand, even if they can't at first. They want to be able to ask the questions. In your profile, you mentioned X, Y, and Z. Can you explain that to me? I'd love to know more. And as an employer, if I'm in an interview with someone and they say to me, I would love to know more, I want to learn, that's huge. You can't teach somebody to have curiosity and constant knowledge, wanting constant knowledge. But you get somebody who has those things organically, that's somebody who's going to do well because they're going to seek things out for you. So think about that when you're writing these statements and you're publishing these statements. Think about what you've gone through and the obstacles you faced and why it's so important that you do what you do. So now, as we get to the track and listen piece, data is important. Now, I'll be the first one to say, I don't always need a ton of data, but it is important that we do, when we make decisions, we are able to look at what's going on. We are able to look at those analytics. So first piece I want to talk about is listening. And what that means is you have a wealth of knowledge in your organization. Every single person that works there has feedback. Every single person has information that's valuable. So, do an employer brand audit. Create a situation where you're seeing, with employee surveys or even externally, what's resonating with people, what's not resonating with people, what's offensive, what's being embraced. Look at how you're doing on social media. Now, is what you're putting out there, is it being shared? Is it being liked? Are you getting comments to it? Maybe it's controversial, but are people responding to it? Look at places like Glassdoor, Google, Yelp, and any of these other sites. What are people saying? Are they saying that you're a bad place to work? Are they saying you're a good place to work? Are you responding to it? Something I mentioned earlier. And understand that typically when people write on those sites, it's either because they had the best day ever or the worst day ever. It's very rare that somebody, who's just plugging along is going to go on there. So it's important that we understand that, but it's also important that we thank people for what's positive and offer the opportunity to speak to people when they provide things that can be constructive or negative. Both are really important. But when people are looking at these sites, they want to know that the company is aware. They want to know that your organization is paying attention to this. Talk to your hiring managers, get the feedback, see what they're seeing, not just what whomever is leading the search is doing. And this is probably the most important piece of it. Adjust as necessary. Understand that environments change. Things, as we've learned in the last few years, Monday can be a regular Monday, and then Tuesday, the whole world changes. Adjust as necessary. Nothing that we do is set in stone. And even if it is, it just means we need a bigger chisel to change it. Now, when we're looking at these data points, what I think is the most critical one is time to hire. And the reason I think that's the most critical is when we look at time to hire, if it's slow, then there's problems there. It's either we're not attracting the right people, we're not marketing properly, we have a bad reputation, we're not offering a competitive package. But when our time to hire is fast, we're not straining our people anymore. We have a full staff. We're able to implement what we need to implement. Time to hire is absolutely critical. The day that position goes live to the day that position gets shut down is what I think is one of the most important analytic pieces when we look at talent acquisition, and it's directly related to how you market. When we look at the acceptance rates, if people are going through the entire interview process only to turn us down, it means we're either not fast enough, we're not competitive enough, or we did something to alienate them. You know, and then as we're looking at, as I said earlier, the employee surveys, well, are employees making referrals? Are employees wanting people they know to work for your organization? If the answer is no, that means your brand is not adequate. And it also means that those people, they're going to leave. Because if they wouldn't want someone that they trust to work with them, they're not engaged. They're not happy. Because we all know when we're enjoying ourselves, we want the people around us to enjoy themselves too. And we want to bring people in to do that. This goes to, you know, how engaged are your people and how well are you retaining your people? You know, ultimately, you know, like I said, that retention rate is absolutely critical to a talent acquisition strategy, because if you're filling the same position 10, 12 times a year, 2 years, you know, you're spinning your wheels and you're not going to be effective in what you choose to do. The next one is a little bit harder, but it's, you know, your competitor win-loss ratio. If people are not accepting your offers and they're accepting an offer with a comparable organization down the road, that's something that is important. What are they doing that you're not? And what do you need to do so that not only are you hiring the people that you want to hire, but also the people that other organizations want to come work for you? You know, I'm a big believer in partnership, but if you don't have a great internal team, there's nothing to partner with. And finally, awards won. People want to be part of something positive. People want to be part of an organization that is doing great things and being recognized for it. Additionally, as we're thinking about our brand, to highlight these awards, well, these are things that set us apart from our competition. These awards, they really show that we are walking the walk and that what we're doing is extremely substantial and people are recognizing that. And so as we're thinking about our employer brand, and as we're thinking about how we do this to resonate with people, one thing to think about is if you're going to look for an opportunity, what are the things that are going to appeal to you? And then go back to your organization, and are they doing the things that you would need if you were looking for a job right now? So with that, one of the most crucial things, and this is a conversation that goes back and forth constantly right now, is how to be flexible. Let's be very clear. We are still dealing with the COVID pandemic. It's not over. You know, a lot of things have loosened up and lightened up, but it's not over. And now we're also dealing with, you know, a public health emergency in the monkeypox. So people have really started thinking about what's important to them. What do they value? Where and how do they feel safe? And so most professionals have really had the chance to reevaluate the priorities, you know, for themselves. You know, they're realizing that they want to have fulfillment and they want to be someplace where the employee matters. And the days of, you know, you join an organization, you work there 30 years and you retire, for the most part, those days are over. You know, so let's think about how we can get back to having people stay, how we can get back to really creating an organization that people want to join. And the first thing is reimagine your 9 to 5. You know, unless it's a direct care position, and even with some of those, there's a little bit of flexibility, but unless it's a direct care position, let's think about what employees need to be successful. All right, do they have to work 9 to 5? Do they have to work in an office? Well, if you say yes, why? Why do they have to work in an office? And there are some great arguments for it. You know, for one, especially for newer employees to the organization or newer employees to the workforce, there's a lot of intrinsic learning that happens just by hearing conversations. There's something to be said for being able to, you know, go to somebody and say, look, this is what I'm dealing with. What are your thoughts? Honestly, there's a lot to just being able to say hi to somebody in a hallway. The flip side of that is a lot of people don't feel safe doing that. And for a couple of years, we've been sitting at our home offices and we've been really, really productive. And so since it's been proven that we can be productive, a lot of people don't think it's necessary to change that. And because of that, remote work options are, you know, they're top of mind. People are thinking about it. You know, LinkedIn recently found that for the month of February, although remote job posts accounted for only 20% of the total postings, they've attracted 50% of the total applicants and 45% of views. So what that means, that's something that people are thinking about. That's something that is important to people, and that's something that we have to be thinking about. And it doesn't mean that things have to be 100% remote. Absolutely not. But there may be opportunities to do this. For example, and I remember, you know, years ago, I started my career, I was working in group homes with youth that for various reasons couldn't be with their families anymore. And there was obviously a lot of paperwork and recording, and some of it had to be done in real time, but some of it didn't. And unless there's a regulation about it, what's the difference if someone spends 4 hours on site while they're dealing with the on-site stuff and then does that paperwork at home? As long as it gets handed in on time, is there an issue with that? And this isn't a yes or no question, it's more something to think about. You know, maybe there's an opportunity to do a split shift. Maybe there's an opportunity to do a hybrid model. You know, there are a lot of different answers, but what is critical is that there is flexibility. And remembering that being flexible opens the talent pool. You know, if I need somebody that can do, you know, accounting or even marketing, yeah, it's great, you know, when you know I can see them. But honestly, if I trust the people I hire, I don't ever need to see them. So I know they're giving me the work that I need. I know we're having check-ins. I know we're leveraging technology. And if there's a dynamite person that may not live in commuting distance, well, I can still get them and they can still do 95% of the work, and maybe they come in once a month. You know, there are a lot of options to this, but we have to remember that we have to, as organizations, be where our employees need us to be. You know, I studied clinical social work for a little while, and I remember one of the most crucial things that I was taught, and I've taken this with me outside of the realm of being a clinician, is you have to start where people are. You can't expect people to start where you are. And so as we're hiring people, we have to look at where do people need to be right now? What are the things that are important in life? We have to understand that the marketplace has changed from what it was 3 years ago, and we have to be able to adjust. And that doesn't mean 100%, but it does mean that we have to be aware and there has to be a flexibility on both sides. So as we're talking about flexibility and work-life balance and wellness, one of the things that's absolutely critical right now is care. Embracing a flexible workforce is one way. Um, Giving people the opportunity to care for family members or a flexible schedule. One of the things that I do in my job is when I source candidates, I'm looking at LinkedIn, I'm looking at Idealist, to see where there might be other opportunities. I'm looking at Indeed, all of these things. I can do that at 10 o'clock in the evening, just same as I can do it at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's something that we need to be aware of. Family dynamics have changed. It is so much harder to find daycare right now. We have to be aware of that. That's keeping people out of the workforce. But if there were options and there was flexibility, then maybe that person who's sitting home taking care of their child can come back to work and give you what you need as well. Highlight how you care. If you're offering, and I was talking with somebody not too long ago who was sharing that their organization provided free mental health therapy for their employees when they need it. Like, that's huge right now. We've all been traumatized. It's impossible for us not to have been going through a pandemic and thinking about all of the adjustments that we had to make and we still have to make. Think about how you can really change it from a work-life balance to a life-work balance. Understanding that we all have lives, we all have loved ones, we all have things going on. Think about how we can do life-work balance as opposed to work-life balance so that our employees are refreshed, they're enthusiastic, they're looking forward to coming in, they're not burnt out and tired and exhausted. And some examples, it is rethinking parental leave policies, COVID care policies, mental health benefits. It's rethinking, and I saw this not too long ago, a 3-day bereavement leave policy, which to me is just brilliantly antiquated. If you've got to travel across the country because someone passed away, that's 2 days traveling right there. Think about that. Think about pet care. Think about things like that. It's really, really important that we think about our employees as people first and as part of our organization second. And when we do that, it shows them that we care. Think about the things you need or your family members need or the things that you're going through. Think about how many people had to homeschool for a year or two because there was no choice. So as we prioritize the balance between working and living, and as we think about wellness, healthy employees are more productive employees, period. Happy employees are the most productive. When people are excited and they believe in what you're doing and they know they're being cared for, the outcomes are critical. And so we'll do a summary and then, I'm happy to take questions. And, what's really important is we are seeing a shift from prioritizing compensation to focusing on values, mission of an organization, which is good. As a nonprofit, it's important to realize, though, that the conversation, has to highlight that. It's no longer that we should be highlighting salary. We have to highlight what we do. We have to understand that we are competing with for-profits. We are competing with organizations that do different things. If I'm going to be taking a $15, $17, $20 an hour job, I want the one that I'm going to enjoy the most. I want the one where they're going to treat me the best. If I'm going to be an executive making $100,000 to $200,000 a year, I want to know that my voice matters. I want to know that I can take care of my teams. I want to know that the organization is invested in me at any level. Are you providing me with training so I can continue to grow? You know, we as mission-driven organizations, mission-driven businesses, because that's what we are. You know, we're focused on social consciousness, on awareness, on improving people's lives. You know, we need to leverage our mission to promote what our organization has accomplished, is accomplishing, and will accomplish. We have to focus on the good that we're doing. And, you know, if we don't have amazing teams, then quite honestly, none of this is going to happen. And one thing that I stress most, people are your most important asset. Without people, there's no implementing anything. There's no one to process payroll. There's no one to do your marketing. There's no one to do the direct work we do with our membership. And so when we think about what is really the most important function, it's really making sure that we have the people and we have the right people. And so we have to think about a robust strategy within our talent acquisition function to do this. And that doesn't mean just dumping it on, you know, an HR person who's doing 50 other things, but it really means thinking through and what am I doing as an organization to capture passive candidates? What am I doing as an organization to make sure that people that may not be able to be hired choose to volunteer so that I can hire them later? Your brand is really critical to that. And it's really important that we set ourselves up to show what we're doing and then reap the rewards of that success. And what I would like to do now is go back to Mac and ask if there are any questions. Unfortunately, I am not able to see that on my screen right now.
I got you. Yeah, I got you.
Excellent. Appreciate that.
I've been practicing reading out loud for you just for this occasion here. We have a couple of questions. They're all from Julie, but different Julies. So for our audience, if your first name's not Julie, we'd love to hear from you because I've got several Julies just asking questions. Our first Julie, Julie P, was talking about how it takes the entire leadership to help retain staff. And did you have any suggestions on how to get the full team's buy-in to support that type of effort?
Absolutely. And so thank you, Julie P. I appreciate the question. So the first thing that is important is leadership needs to understand the value of the people working there. And if leadership doesn't value people, I'm gonna be honest, it's wrong leadership. And it's not going to be a place that's going to be successful. And you know, for some people that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. Your leadership has to want to invest in people. And sometimes they think they are, but they think but the way they are doing it is not actually effective. And so there are tools that can be used. Like I said, you know, the employee surveys. One of the tools that I've used in the past and that I like, you know, is asking simple, you know, it's the Net Promoter Score, and it's basically asking the one question, you know, would you refer somebody to work here? Yes or no? Why is the follow-up? Or do you enjoy working here? Why? That's the follow-up, because then you can really get a pulse of what people are dealing with in a way that really doesn't impact their day. You know, sending out a 50 question, you know, poll doesn't work. But you ask employees one question. It's really important. And, you know, even with that, you know, are you having regular check-ins with team members and asking them, getting their pulse, talking to them? So leadership needs to understand that, yes, you are integral in retention. And if they're not committed to that, you know, honestly, I can take a horse to water, but I can't make it drink. That's the cliche that goes with this. But there are a lot of tools that make it pretty easy to see what people need. And then, like I said earlier, it's listening to them and it's enacting that change. And whether that's fully or whether it's step by step, as long as people know that they're being heard and there are things that are changing, it makes them feel valued. So I hope that answers your question, Julie P. If not, I'm happy to talk more offline. Even if it does and you want more resources, whether it's you or anybody else, I'm happy to continue that conversation as well.
So Rose kind of piggybacked on Julie P's question,
Yes.
talking specifically about the CEO or executive director. Do you have any insights on working directly with the big boss?
Absolutely. So one, understand that they're just a person. Everybody has a title. And unfortunately, in some cases, people at their title go to their head. And in other cases, people are intimidated by people with a title. And in my estimation, what I found, especially in well-run organizations, the executive director, CEO, president, I don't care what they're called, they want to talk to people. They want to understand what's going on. And they want to be able to access that. And so set up a meeting. I've done this a lot in my career, but I will be the first one to say that I'm also, very forward in how I operate. But set up a meeting, talk to them, get to know them, let them know where you're seeing struggles. A lot of times, an executive won't act on certain things because they're just unaware. And it's important for us to understand that many times our chief executives are working on where's the funding coming from? What's our strategy? What do we need to be looking forward to? And right or wrong, they lose track of the small details. And so just like with anything else, it's a conversation. And if your CEO isn't amenable to that conversation with you, have it with your manager. And when you have the next conversation afterwards, follow up on it and go, all right, we talked about this last time. Were you able to bring it, to anyone? Where did it go? And these are things that you can start assessing for health of your organization. But also, when you are looking at that brand, and these are things that are critical to what your organization's brand is. Does your executive team care? The answer is no. Be honest. That's not going to be a situation that lasts real long. If it was just that they were unaware and now they're talking to you and it's illuminating, well, that's a great thing. And you have to give people the opportunity to adjust and adapt. But I think that communication piece is absolutely critical.
Oh, and Julie G would like you to spend a little bit of time on is there any extra stuff that we need to be aware of when we're considering remote workers in this equation?
Well, absolutely. All workers want to feel like they're attached to something. And so with remote workers, and remote work is nothing new. It really isn't. But it hits a lot of organizations new because they haven't had to deal with it, especially community-based organizations. When you're working for a national or international company, they've been dealing with remote workers for a long time. But with a remote workforce, you really have to engage them. And you really have to make sure it starts from onboarding. And again, I'm going to use the word communication. They need to be part of things. They need to know what's going on. They need to be included. And it can be a little bit challenging, but this is where, as coworkers and managers, there needs to be conversation. There needs to be check-in. And there needs to be the question to them, and they have to take responsibility for this. what do you need that you're not getting right now? How can I help you, or what can I do to make sure that you're as invested in this team as this team is for you? And that back and forth is absolutely critical. I've had the luxury of managing people in different states and working with people in different countries. And it's important, like I said earlier, start where they are and think about what you might need in that situation and ask them what they need in that situation. Ask them how they need to be successful. Ask them what technology they need. Ask them, do you prefer email or do you prefer video interactions? And really get to learn them. And what you'll find out, at least what I've found out, is that the way that you engage a remote employee is very similar to the way that you engage a in-person employee. You're just leveraging technology a little bit more. And if you have tools like instant messenger, obviously the use of email, text messaging, there's no reason why you can't communicate on a very regular basis. But that's it's a great thing to bring up, because for a lot of people that have never dealt with it, it's new and they're not quite sure how. Any other questions that have been brought forth?
No, I think that's all. I think you can wrap it up.
All right, well then, I want to say thank you. I appreciate everyone joining. I appreciate the questions. As Max said, we will get you the slide deck. Should there be any questions that you think of after this, or anything related to talent acquisition, you can feel free to contact me directly. When we email out the slide decks, I will make sure that my contact information is there. You can also always get a hold of me through 501. We talk very frequently and have a very close relationship between the two companies. And I hope that this has been helpful. And again, thank you for your time.
Sweet. Thank you for your time, Ben. And like you said, you all will get information about this session later today. It'll come from me. I'll make sure to include Ben's email in there for you. And if you need anything, just holler at us and we will help you out in any way we can. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, boss. Bye.